Welcome back to the channel. My name's Lee. Just to start this video, I'm going to play you a small clip from a speech Vince Cable gave at an Oxford University panel he was part of. But just before I do that, for those of you who don't know who Vince Cable is, Vince Cable was a MP in the United Kingdom, and he also served as a government minister for 5 years in the Cameron, the Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition government. I think that was between 2010 and 2015 maybe. But yeah, and as part of that he had a lot of negotiations with his Chinese counterparts. He's by nature is an economist, and he served as a fellow at the London School of Economics for a while. And he's also wrote a number of books, and some of those books are specifically on China. I find that his line of thinking is very similar to my own on China. He's very knowledgeable on China, and he's also a very balanced and a very pragmatic type of guy. So I'll just play you the clip now, and then I'll have a little chat about my thoughts on what he said.
To take a particular issue which concerns the British, which is our residual responsibilities in Hong Kong, and people here are routely very upset, worse than upset, angry that decent people are being bundled off to prison and newspaper editors are being shut down. But I have to say, the Chinese always made it absolutely clear what the red lines were in Hong Kong. When Margaret Thatcher went to negotiate with Deng Xiaoping 40 years ago, he said, look, we could have dealt with Hong Kong the way the Indians dealt with colonial enclaves or Indonesia, sent the army in, problem solved in 24 hours. But they didn't. They were more subtle. They saw advantages in keeping this independent entity. But he said, look, there are certain parameters. You can say what you like, free speech, you can criticize the Communist Party, but if there is violent disorder, we will move in and stop it. And those people in Hong Kong who, in the name of democracy and free speech, started throwing Molotov cocktails at the police and vandalizing their legislature, did their little bit to kill Hong Kong democracy, because it was very clear what the rules of the game were. And the Chinese were not in any way dishonest or unclear about what was permissible.
So as you can see from what Vince said, it was clear what was going to happen if the Hong Kong protest turned violent. China made it very clear what their red line was, and people, a lot of the young people actually crossed that red line. Now, the Western media portrayed the protests in Hong Kong as that all very one-sided, as that the brutality was coming from the police. And that was never really the case. In my opinion, the police were very, very patient. They were had Molotov cocktails thrown at them, as Vince has just alluded to, and the protests got considerably violent in Hong Kong. There was people set on fire, there was people hit on the head with bricks, there was many people attacked, especially even women were attacked, cars were attacked, and they became very, very violent. Those protesters who became violent smashed up metro stations, they smashed up property, especially property of mainland Chinese people. They attacked businesses of mainland Chinese people, and they also even attacked the legislative building in Hong Kong. Now, many of those protesters, one of the leaders, a guy named Nathan Law, fled to the UK under the BNO passport scheme, which Britain raised for these people from Hong Kong to be able to go to the UK, so they didn't face any charges or persecution from the Chinese authorities. Now, one of the leaders of that, a guy named Nathan Law, also ran to the UK, and he's now being portrayed by certain people in the UK, people like Benedict Rogers, Luke de Pulford, Emily Harris, as some sort of hero. Benedict Rogers is one of these people who thinks that, Hong Kong still belongs to the British and that the British should still be able to decide what goes on there. He runs an organisation called Hong Kong Watch, where he raises money from people to fight for the democracy of Hong Kong. Now, it's kind of ironic in the sense that had those rioters actually took away the freedoms and the so-called democracies that Hong Kong had. However, Hong Kong is not as sort of undemocratic as the Western media will want you to think. There's many people who still live quite happily and fairly freely in Hong Kong. And it's also interesting that many of the Hong Kong people at the time were scared to speak out against the protesters and the rioters because they were fearful of getting attacked. And I just sort of leave you with this question, if in your country you'd have had a lot of foreign interference, and that was what was going on in Hong Kong. There was a lot of interference from especially the USA, but also the UK. You even had politicians flying over and suggesting that they do this and do that. That there was some American politicians were trying to direct the rioters. There was a lot of money put into Hong Kong from both the US and the UK through various NGOs in order to try and influence the behaviour of the young people that was going on there. And basically China stood that for a certain length of time, and then they had enough, and that is when they sort of changed the rules by introducing a national security law. Anyway, I'd like to know what you think down in the comments, so leave a comment below. This video is already getting a bit long. What I do say on all of my videos is don't just read the headlines, do a bit of your own digging. And on that note, there's a YouTuber by the name of Daniel Dumbrill. He's a guy that lives in Shenzhen, China, but he used to live in Hong Kong, and he documented a lot of the violence that happened in the Hong Kong protests that the Western media wouldn't or didn't report. I'll leave a link to his channel down below. I suggest if you are really interested in finding out what really happened in Hong Kong, you go and visit his channel and have a look at some of those videos. But as I always say, don't just read the headlines, do your own research, look into the facts yourself. But as always, for now, take care.